What is going on, guys? Happy Tuesday. Welcome back to episode 101 of the Eat, Train, Prosper podcast. Today's podcast is going to be a little bit more of the prosperity side of eating and training, where Bryan and I are going to cover some of the historical highs and lows of our respective entrepreneurship journeys inside the fitness space. I know we have a lot of fellow coaches, especially newer coaches emerging in the space, listening to this podcast, and I feel like this episode can be beneficial for you guys, especially if you are going through some rough patches, which Bryan and I know very, very well, and thought that it would be insightful to provide some of that for you. As always, before we get into the topic, Bryan, what's going on?
Yeah, man. Lots of highs and lows as an entrepreneur for sure. I've been doing this thing since I guess 2009 officially, but probably even before that on some level. So yeah, we'll have some good stuff to share. Regarding my week or kind of updates going on here, we kind of skimmed over them pretty quickly last week. So I have a few that I'll spend a little more time on. First off, real quick, I did do my ski trip last week with some buddies and other families with kids up in Winter Park last week, which had its highs and lows, much like entrepreneurship. A low being that we went to park and dropped Bryson off for his ski lesson, and we got there at 8:30 thinking we'd be fine. Not fine. 8:30 is way too late to arrive to a ski slope. So we had to park in 30-minute parking to drop him off for his ski lesson, and then get back to the car where we had to drive to like the furthest lot away, wait for a bus that never arrived, or maybe it arrived like right as we decided not to wait anymore and decided to walk to the ski slope. So we didn't actually get on the slope until after 11 o'clock. This consisted of a number of tiffs between Kim and I, as we were both just like so annoyed with the process and lugging all our shit around. And like literally she almost left at one point. We made it. We got to the slope. We almost got in another fight as she tried to make me do greens with her. She was like, it's my first time skiing in 6 years. I need to do some greens. And I'm like, fine, go do greens. I'm leaving, I'm going to do blues and blacks. She was not happy about that. So I ended up doing a green with her and then departed. So yeah, just like entrepreneurship, it's the highs and the lows. And in the end of the day, I ended up having a number of really, really solid runs. Conditions weren't great, but made the best of it. And my skiing was amazing. Like for somebody that skis between 1 and 5 times a year, I'm always surprised by how quickly it comes back and how it seems like every year I somehow improve, even though I don't really practice. So that was nice. Yeah, just a overall like good experience. I think I'm going to actually take my dad to go skiing. I've never really taken him on a real like birthday present thing before. It's kind of weird. Now that I'm 40, I feel like I owe my dad some things that he's always provided for me. And I remember so many good memories from our ski trips growing up, where he would take me to Vail or Aspen or wherever else. And, we would stay in like a semi bougie hotel and do like we would call it the executive circuit, I think is what we called it. But it's basically like a steam room, sauna, hot tub, cold dunk, 8 sprocket shower. And so you go through this sequence of like 5 different things where you get like super hot and then you get cold and then you get hot again. And so I want to take him to, it was Vail Athletic Club. I kind of want to take him there and have this whole experience for him now, like 20 years later. So anyways, cool things that I guess you get to do as you age. Moving on to, I guess, more relevant things, to eating and training. I'm in week 3 of my strength cycle now, and I discussed last week how I bumped up my sets from 2 to 3 when I went out of deload week into my first work week, and I felt like the 3 sets felt like they were too much, at least in the first day. And so now I'm in week 3, which is week 2 of the actual work weeks. 3 sets didn't feel so exhausting yesterday. I think that one of 2 things. Either I think more than likely is that I probably wasn't fully recovered coming out of that deload week, because I had just come off the back end of like an 8-week hypertrophy phase. So I think that maybe coming out of that deload week, I was still holding a bunch of residual fatigue. And so when I bumped those sets up to 3, it just felt like too much. And now it feels like I'm in week 3 of training 3 days a week, which means I have more recovery days than I do training days. I did 3 sets of everything yesterday, and it was no big deal. I got through it pretty quickly, made some progress on stuff, and all that felt good. So I think that I did make the right programming choice where I was kind of doubting myself last week. So it's cool this week to kind of see that. Pendulum squat has been an interesting piece of this 3-week strength cycle so far, because in week 1, I decided, or I guess deload week, we'll call it week 1. In week 1, I decided I was going to do it without any heel wedges and put my feet up higher. My justification for that, or rationalization, being that it's a strength cycle. I want to incorporate more muscles, not make it quite as specific to my quads. But what I found in doing that the first week was that it just felt so systemically fatiguing. Kind of like you and I have talked about on pendulum before. Like if you're doing sets of 4 to 6 or 4 to 7 reps, it just feels like it takes your soul instead of really feeling like it's training your muscles. It kind of has that same feeling of like, you know, when you back squat or do any of these other like really systemically fatiguing compound movements. So I really did not enjoy that first week of pendulum squatting at all. And then the second week, I decided to elevate my heels, but I would do it in a manner that would still put my feet higher. So I put a 110-pound dumbbell at the bottom of the platform, and then I would put my heel wedges on the dumbbell so that it elevated my feet up. This only like partially solved the problem, but what it didn't do was it didn't allow my knees to continue traveling forward the whole time. So this is another thing we've talked about on the podcast, where we see people doing these hack squat and pendulum squat machines. They reach a point somewhere around parallel usually where the knees stop going forward, but the athlete continues to descend by essentially hip flexion, by dropping their butt further. And that's what was happening when I had my heel wedges, but my feet still high. It just wasn't like a good looking rep. You could watch it from the outside and you could tell that I was making up a lot of that depth via hip flexion. So third week, yesterday, I was like, you know what? Screw this. I like my pendulum the way I like my pendulum. So I took the dumbbell away. I put the heel wedges at the very bottom, put my feet low. And you can just see, like, it was on my story, but basically my knees just keep going forward the entire time. When I reach the bottom, I'm reaching the bottom because my knees can't travel anymore, not because my hips can't travel anymore. And it just felt like a much more rewarding movement. The unfortunate side of that is I don't exactly know whether I'm progressing or not, because I've kind of changed my setup every week. But on the positive side, I think that I just know now that I have 2 ways I can do the pendulum. I can either do it this way with my feet low, or I can do it with a B stance, kind of single leg variation, again with my feet low. But this specific pendulum squat is not conducive for me to do it with my feet set higher. So lesson learned there. I do have 2 other updates, but I've been talking forever, so I feel like I want to take a break, and I'll pass it over to you here.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to add on the back end of your most recent statement with the pendulum is like, sometimes like things that are on your program or on paper like just don't really work out once you get in there and start feeling stuff out. Like there's a pendulum here at the gym. I was super excited about it, and then I went to use it one day and I was like, this is dog shit.
Oh no, what brand
and I like
is it?
tried. It's Watson. The whole gym is Watson. And you know, I don't even care anymore. Like Watson makes garbage equipment. Like the welds are fantastic. It's beautiful. It's all like brushed black steel. It's like they never actually used them or QA'd the machinery. I had to something on my story yesterday where like on the hack squat, if you look like, you know, when you put a plate or a weight onto a weight pin, right? You push it all the way in, right? That's how you normally load things. On this hack squat, if you do that, the weights hit the pins that manage the pitch of the plate on the bottom. So you have to leave like a 5-inch gap when you put the plate on so it won't hit the bottom. I mean, it's like it boggles my mind that these things made it through the actual QA process and they ship them this way. But it's like all the machines are like that. They have all these like wonky things where the welders did a fantastic job, but it's like the people who actually designed it did not do a great job. And then moving into my updates here, the first one is my weight is finally back up to baseline. And now I'm like hovering in the high 200 point X's. So today was like a 200.7. For any listeners, back 2 weeks ago, I was there. And then I had 2 weeks on podcast day on Tuesdays where I got sick 2 weeks in a row. And then after last week, I was back down in like the 196s again, clawing my way back up. But I just love seeing the scale climb. It's like the complete opposite of everyone else. Like as I'm getting leaner and the scale's going down, like I start getting like a little like skin crawly feeling, and then like I don't care what I'm doing. When I hit that like 189 point something, I'm like, diet's done. we're done here.
You
But
can't
then
see the
as
180s. You hate the
I
180s.
hate it. But then as the scale goes up, I don't know. I am like, it's just like wishful thinking. I'm like, oh, I'm getting so jacked. Like I'm making so much progress. I'm going to be so jacked. Like knowing that's not actually the case. I'm probably just putting on some body fat as well, but I'm just going to let myself keep thinking it. But I do enjoy putting on weight for sure.
Yeah, I mean, you can't actually realistically think that you're gaining muscle unless you're gaining weight. So even if
Yeah.
like you're not gaining that much muscle, at least you're gaining like micrograms or whatever to a point that wouldn't be happening if you were losing weight, right?
I would hope it would at least be milligrams or grams, not micrograms.
Hey man, thousands of micrograms equal milligrams and thousands of milligrams equal grams. So, we're just working in different
Yeah.
quantities here.
And then my next one is, speaking of entrepreneurs, right? The entrepreneurs are hitting the Bali gym scene, and we are about to have options here. So we're pretty much, since like I first started showing up here in 2019, there's only been like one game in town, and that's been Body Factory, and it is a really sweet gym. It's massive, it's packed, it's so packed, and it's damn expensive, right? I mean, I just ran the numbers before the episode, but for just gym access itself, like none of the sauna or recovery center, anything like that, it's 170 US per month. And that's just
Wow.
for a gym. And then if
Yeah.
you want to be able to like use the pool there or go in the hot tub or the sauna, that goes up to $240 per month.
And how much is that money in Bali money? Like, what is 170? Like, what's a minimum wage in Bali, or like how far does that go for you?
That is a lot here. I believe that's like 2.5 million Indonesian rupiah, which is the currency here. For me, like a meal, like a good, like a let's say I get like chicken breast, rice, vegetables. It's about 90,000. So
90,000. Yeah.
90,000, yeah. And
Which
then
is
like
that's 1/25 of
yes,
your gym membership.
yeah.
So like
Gas
$7. It's like $7 American for that meal that you're talking
for
about.
about that, yeah. Like
Yeah.
meals, like good quality meals, even if you want to get like an imported like Australian like ribeye or something like that, you're at about around like $10-11 like US. The gym is absurdly expensive comparatively to like everything else here.
Yeah.
But they've been here for 3+ years, literally printing money because they're pretty much sold out. But other people are getting like wise, and now there's like two more gyms that have opened, waiting on equipment. The one gym, I kind of feel bad for them because they're like, we're gonna get the best equipment manufacturer. We're getting fully outfitted with Arsenal Strength, which makes sweet equipment. The downside of Arsenal Strength is they are notorious for being massively behind on delivering equipment. And the gym was opening in November, right? And then they finally did a soft opening and like got some filler equipment. And then when we were coming back, like, oh, we're going to have the equipment mid-January. And then that turned into the end of January. And now that turned into, mid-February. And then the latest I heard was mid-March, and that it hasn't even shipped from the US yet. I kind of feel bad for them because another gym like opened up and went with a different equipment manufacturer that they could get much quicker. Still good stuff. Panada makes some. They're out of Italy. They make some pretty cool stuff. So I'm super excited about that, to have options for gyms, and they won't be as crowded because now the same amount of people can be spread over 3 gym locations.
Yep.
We covered a little bit of the past 2 Tuesdays for me. This Tuesday, we had a 6-hour power outage, and I was like crossing my fingers. I was like, please, I cannot cancel another podcast episode on Bryan. But like, the power went out literally at like noon and then came back on at like 6. And then I was taking a shower to like, after the gym. Fortunately, the gym power, like the gym's far enough away that like they still had power. I'm literally in the shower and everything just goes dark.
Oh man.
I was like, no. first I was like, fuck, dude, I really don't want to have to cancel the podcast. And the second was like, what the fuck do I do? Like, it's pitch dark in here. Our water pumps off of electric. Like, I didn't get far enough into the shower that I could be like, oh, I'm done. And I'm like, what am I really going to do here? So I literally just stood there in the shower just waiting. And after like 12 minutes, the power came back on. And I was like, all right, I'm going to hurry, finish up and get out. But and then the last thing I have is just like adding 1 to 2 reps per week on a lot of exercises. And I'm like really excited about that. And it's funny is like that's the reality at this point. Like if I can squeeze out 1 rep on like my anterior delt press over last week and then eventually hit the top end of the rep range next week and then go up 5 kilos, and then like I might over a training block, I may only increase load like once or twice, and then I end up with like 3 or 4 attempts at each of those weights. And that's just the kind of the nature of the beast. And that's could be disheartening depending on how you look at it. Or it could be like, hey, this is what these are the rules of the game now that I've been fortunate enough to make all of those gains over all of those years, sort of thing.
Yeah. No, I totally resonate with that. And I think that the way that I tend to do things makes it a little bit more ambiguous because I tend to get closer to failure week to week with things. And so there's this inevitable like small victory, as I call it, that occurs, but it isn't really like necessarily progress. Just because I add a rep but move 1 rep closer to failure, you can't really call that progress. So I feel you as well. One of the best ways that I assess progress now, at least on my short overload movements, since I don't really use partials on lengthened movements, but like all on my lengthened sets, when I get to like week 3 of my cycles, my hypertrophy cycles at least, you know, I'll do a set that is a lengthened set where I can't really get more than maybe 1 or 0 full reps, and then the range of motion falls off. But what I'll see happen is, you know, I'm getting 1 full rep in week 3, and then by week 6 or 7 before deload, I might get 2 or 3 full reps, which feels like a really, really significant increase because it's only 1 or 2 reps increase, but it's like 100% increase. It's like you're taking a 1 rep max and now you're turning it into a 2 rep max type thing. So definitely different ways of skinning that cat there. But I think to your point, like the reality is that, yeah, we can both go an entire 6 to 8 week cycle and basically make a rep or 2 improvement. And that is a victory. Like that is like, hey, I'm still making progress at this point. So that's cool, you know? Yeah. So moving on to my final 2 updates here. I get excited about my new cycles, like in the middle of the current cycles that I'm doing. So I'm in this strength cycle now, but I'm already excited about my next hypertrophy cycle. So I wrote a draft of that I'm intending on starting on February 13th. So if anyone's listening, want to jump on the new hypertrophy cycle that I'm doing, February 13th is the tentative start date there. And I have a 5-way split that is going to be trained over 8 calendar days. You know, my favorite thing to do, stay off the calendar as much as possible. And it is a shoulder and quad specialization cycle. So I'm literally taking a lot of that stuff that we discussed in our prior episode where we kind of went into that rabbit hole of always specializing, being like the future, always having something that you're putting extra focus on. And so I spent like a year prioritizing my hamstrings, and I think subjectively they improved. I certainly have gotten stronger at the hamstring specific movements. And when I look at them, there's this one pose that I do in the shower where I can kind of turn my leg sideways and look at my hamstring from like this like 45-degree angle, and it hangs more than it did prior. So I'm looking at that as progress and saying that it was a successful cycle. The new one, focusing on quads and shoulders, the split is pretty unique. So what I'm going to do is on day 1, I'm going to do torso push-pull. So that's basically shoulders, chest, and back. Torso push-pull. Then the next day is going to be quads and biceps. Then the next day is torso push-pull again. And then we're going to do hams and triceps. And then the 5th day is the quads and shoulder specifically. So I have an entire day dedicated just to quads and shoulders. and then it would circle back through and start with torso push pull again. So I think this is going to be a super cool, unique way of approaching it. The day that's just quads and shoulders is going to be circuits of same muscle group supersets, which I love to throw in once a year for a cycle. So we'll have like a tri-set where I have like some rear delt, some front delt, and some lateral delt stuff, all kind of in succession with maybe like 30 to 60 seconds rest in between. And then for the quad circuit, what did I decide on? I think I'm going leg extensions supersetted with sissy squats. So that should be about as awful as the face Aaron just made, because he knows how that's going to feel. But I think focusing specifically on a short lengthened superset there, I think I'll get pretty sore the first week or two, but I think once my body adapts to that and the repeated bout effect kicks in, I don't think that soreness is going to be extremely daunting, just because it doesn't have any of those really big compound movements that tend to lead to a lot of that lingering soreness. So I'm super excited about this new cycle. The one thing I'm not the most excited about is that it's starting 4 days before we leave for San Diego. So we're going to leave for San Diego February 17th. Cycle starts February 13th. I'm probably going to have to just be ready to be creative with swaps and things like that along the way. So yeah, moving on. My final update here is, you guys have heard me talk throughout the course of the last few months about VO2 max and zone 2 cardio and stuff like that. And I have just been going deeper and deeper down this rabbit hole of, call it, I think the term is health span. Have I brought that up before on the podcast? It's basically like a bit of a difference than just lifespan, because lifespan doesn't entail health span as well. Like essentially the idea being that you're 85 or 90 and you can still get up off the ground with 3 points of contact. So you don't need to use both your hands. You can use your 2 legs plus 1 hand to get up off the ground. To be able
to do that now.
You can get up
off the ground.
You can get up off the ground with no hands. Yeah, you can do it with just legs. You just do a deck squat. You roll back, you roll forward, you pop up on your legs type thing. Yeah. I mean, when you're 90, if you can get up off the ground with 3 points of contact, I think that's a huge victory. I want to be able to see my grandkids running at me and be able to pick them up and whatever in my 80s. I think that those are kind of important markers of health span. But along the same lines of health span are these these metabolic pieces that tend to decline with age. And so you have things like, obviously you and I have discussed diabetes, where glucose tolerance goes down. And, VO2 max is something that decreases with age, much like muscle mass decreases with age. And there's so much correlation. The most correlated thing with longevity is VO2 max. So those with a top 25th percentile VO2 max compared to the bottom 25th percentile VO2 max have a 5 times less likely morbidity, less likely chance of dying, basically. Those with more muscle mass in the top 25% to those with the least muscle mass in the bottom 25% have a 3 times more likely chance of surviving. So VO2 max is correlated higher than muscle mass is. Obviously, muscle mass is extremely important too. And then both of those things regulate glucose and metabolic function super well. And so both of those being super important as we age. And given that VO2 max decreases decade to decade as we get older, and my VO2 max has always been ubiquitously low compared to my peers in CrossFit or in other sport, it's something that I'm trying to focus on. And I think it's important, and I hate it. I absolutely hate doing cardio still, but I think it's really important and it's something I'm prioritizing. So the goal is 3 to 4 times a week for 45 to 75 minutes, which is a shit ton of cardio. But essentially the research on this is showing that 4 to 6 times a week for 60 to 90 minutes is kind of what you want to maximize VO2 output. And I just do not have 4 to 6 times a week for 60 to 90 minutes. So I'm going to start with 3 times a week for 45 to 60 minutes is kind of going to be my starting point. and then try to progress up from there. And then I'm also going to try and do more of that as the weather warms, because I talked about last week how much I hated sitting on the Peloton for an hour. I couldn't imagine doing that, or sitting on a rower for an hour, or like any of these super monotonous cardiovascular approaches. But getting outside on my bike, definitely something I enjoy. So maybe I can up the dose there as the weather gets nicer, or as we're in San Diego. But at least for right now, I think my goal is going to be 3 times a week for 45 to 60 minutes. And it actually works really well with this strength cycle that I'm doing, because I have 3 days of training, and then I can throw 3 days of cardio in there and still have a rest day. So anyways, just kind of some of the things that are on my mind. I think that crossing that barrier of turning 40 just kind of, it's weird, because it's like, I don't think I'm actually on the back half of my life. Like, I think I'm going to live more than 80 years, but you don't know that. Like, I could die tomorrow. Like, you just don't know how long you're going to live. But there is a really weird perspective shift that occurs when you start looking at life on the backside instead of being on the front side. And I didn't know how to really verbalize that until recently. But it really has like had a huge impact on just the way I live my life in general. And so I wanted to share that with you guys.
Yeah, I had never really thought about it from that perspective of like being on, like, you're on the back half now. Like, that has never really even crossed my mind, but
It's kind of wild, right?
it really, really is. And I would say, like, I've had, and I'm sure of the conversations I've had with you. And then, I mean, honestly, just a lot of clientele I work with, I get a lot more. Sorry, there's a fucking bug will not stop landing on me. They're just older now. I have, numerous clients who are, guys in their 50s, guys in their 40s. We look at labs and stuff. And some of these clients, I have to start having that conversation. Like, okay, like, we have a high stress lifestyle. You haven't prioritized it for a long time. Like, we got to look at lipids from a pure numbers standpoint. Like, cardiovascular disease is the number one killer of Americans. Like, we need to know. We just need to look. Things could be great, but things could also be bad. And then we need to be like, yo, you need to go talk to your doctor, sort of thing. And that's just like seeing more. That's just kind of, all right, Aaron, we're going to be 35 here in a month and a half. We're not 27 anymore, sort of thing. So it's been weighing on me more, and knowing that I would say one thing that is weighing on me, like, I'm going to be an older dad, like, I'm going to have my first child probably at like 38 ish. So I'm like, I got to be good for years and years after that. So like, even at that, when they're 12, I still need to be able to like go play basketball or football or whatever. I'm like, dude, I'm going to be fucking in my mid 50s damn near at that point, sort of
I
thing.
know.
So that's been like a big one for me. And with my current protocol, like, I have cardio in that I've actually been following now. And God, like you said, it sucks. Like, I'm a mess doing it. And like, it's not a lot. So we're doing like HIIT cardio. It's 8 rounds. It takes me like 20 minutes total to complete. But my God, I get like the same anxiety I get when I have to go do like my top hack squat set, because I know it's just like, it just hurts and it does not feel good whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, no cardio feels good, but that one specifically is really awful. And it's kind of the same energy system as weight training. I mean, not exactly, because it's like shorter rest periods, harder bursts, like, but it is a similar energy system. So I'm pretty good at doing that sort of stuff, just because I think of all the years of lifting and playing basketball and stuff. But taking me out to that like 45 to 90 minute domain of just steady state, oh man, I just am awful at clearing lactate. And so it's really something that I need to become more efficient at as time goes on too. But on the positive side, like, I've heard a number of stories too, of like, there's one specific outlier, a guy who was a smoker and sedentary, never even worked out until he was in his 40s. And then in his 40s, he had some bad blood work and decided to make a drastic change. And he stopped smoking, started exercising, became a competitive cyclist. And now he's 70, and his metabolic function is that of a 40-year-old. So like, you just, I mean, there's a lot of opportunity later in life to really hammer this stuff. And I think that one thing that doesn't get mentioned a lot is that once you retire and you no longer have the stresses of life and work and family and all this stuff, that you have the opportunity to commit more time to these things that do improve longevity. And so I don't think that it's something that you necessarily have to start hammering full force at 40 years old when you're in the middle of some of the most stressful times of your life in general. But I think it's good to be prudent and start as early as you can.
Would you say it's time to finally get into our
Yeah,
episode today?
yeah, let's do it.
Cool. So, like we talked about in the beginning of the episode, we're going to talk about some of the high highs and the low lows of being an entrepreneur in the health and fitness industry. So, I mean, I think what we should do, Bryan, is like let's kind of quickly walk back to what the early days kind of looked like for you, because I think your journey has been a little bit more complex than mine, you just have a lot more years under your belt. So, for some of the newer listeners, or maybe even older listeners who don't really know the beginning of your entrepreneurship journey.
Yeah, so after graduating college in 2006 in with exercise science, I really wanted to go into a field where my passion was. Like I was born to be in the exercise field is the way I felt about it. And yet in 2006, I had been training now for 9 years. I had been coaching friends in college and family members virtually. Like I've been doing the whole thing. Like this was where I was supposed to go. And then all my friends graduated with like business and finance degrees and they were making a ton of money out of college. And the opportunity for me in the exercise field was basically be a glorified personal trainer or get a job as like an assistant strength coach at, a D2, D3 type school, something like that, try to work my way up. Any of those jobs are basically like low $30,000 jobs at that point. And with my friends making double that, I didn't want to feel like I was financially limited, that I couldn't take trips with them or go out to the bars with them and things like that. And so I put the exercise thing on the back burner. I was not happy about that at all. I had a lot of hesitation, but ended up getting a job that I didn't exactly enjoy and did that grind all the way until late 2009. So in 2009, I'm living in San Diego. I had moved out here or moved out there, I guess is the way to say that, to be with Kim. And Anders, who was my college roommate, had just broken up with his longtime girlfriend and decided he was going to come out to San Diego and just spend 6 months there just to kind of have a change. And then his plan was always to move back to the East Coast and continue living life. But we had a bachelor party in Vegas in March of 2010. And we were absolutely smashed. And we decided in that moment that we were going to start a CrossFit gym together. I had been doing CrossFit only for about 4 months, but Anders had been doing it for, I think, 4 years at that point, because he started right when I moved out to San Diego in 2007. So he was maybe 3 years into CrossFit. And so we decided to start this CrossFit gym in 2010, got back from Vegas, and literally the process was, let's go walk up and down Garnett Ave, which was the main drag in Pacific Beach, San Diego. Let's go walk up and down Garnett and see what kind of leases are available. And literally the first place we saw was the place that Aaron was a member of for a number of years, right on the corner of Garnett and Faneuil. It was an old record store, and we gutted the thing, turned it into a gym, wrote a business plan. We had no money saved, so we wrote a business plan that allowed us to essentially start this gym for $70,000. It was a $50,000 build out, and then we had $20,000 in the bank. And that is how we began our gym. One of the coolest parts was we knew we had to get members, but we also knew that people weren't going to pay for something that was so new without trying it first. So we wrote in soap all over the side of the building, come try for free 6 weeks until, what was it? Until we opened in April. And so we were like, until July 1st, you can just train for free. Just come one, come all, come train. And over the course of 6 weeks, we put over 200 unique people through the gym. And then July 1st came and it was like, hey, either sign up or get out. And 35 of you guys signed up out of that 200. And that was enough for us to be profitable, which is kind of wild looking back in retrospect that we could have 35 members and we weren't paying ourselves, but we were, meeting our costs and our overhead and stuff like that. So that's how it all started. And then, I'm sure we'll go deeper and deeper into this rabbit hole of the CrossFit journey, and then coming out of CrossFit and starting online businesses and all that. But that is kind of where it all began. And to this day, just super thankful that Anders came out and that we started that gym, because I may not be here with you talking right now if it wasn't for that.
I do have a funny kind of question for you, and I remember hearing this, and I can't remember now because it's been so long. But wasn't like one of you guys, or maybe both of you guys, like still working your corporate jobs, like but like really half-assing it and like shoeing it in between like classes and stuff like that, while you were like
Yeah.
running the gym, but still had like your real job, back. Wasn't one of them like back east, and were one of you guys like remotely
Yeah,
for
yeah, yeah.
like
So so this is actually we both worked our jobs full time. Like our companies thought we were full time. We worked full time until January 31st of 2011. So we started the gym in like April, May 2010. So it was almost 8 months of time that we were working both jobs. So Anders was working remotely from DC, and he had a conference call noon Pacific time most days. But that was also, we had a noon class. And so it would be like Hillary and this old guy, Fred, and like one or two other people. And so Anders would literally be on his conference call on mute while he's running the 12 p.m. class. Alternatively, on the other hand, I woke up every morning at 5:30 a.m. so that I could run the 6 a.m. class. I would run the 6 a.m. class and the 7 a.m. class. And then as soon as the 7 a.m. class ended, I would shoot off to work as quickly as I could. I had to work in person. So I would go to Kearney Mesa, work from 8 to 4 while Anders ran the midday class. I would come back, get back at like 5. I'd run the 5 p.m., 6 p.m. classes. Anders would run 7, and then we would sweep, mop, do admin work. And by the time we would get home, it would be 10 p.m., shower, watch an hour of Sports Center, wouldn't get to sleep till midnight, and then back up again at 5:30 a.m. again to do it all over. So this was 8 months of this. And I got myself a nasty Adderall habit during that time. I was so addicted to Adderall. Every morning it would be like, pop that jank, like take one at 2 p.m. so that I could make it through the evening and get the night classes done. And it was one of those things where you look back in retrospect and you're just kind of like, man, like how in the hell did I do that? Because it's not something that seems even reasonable to work those types of hours and sleep so few hours for so many months in a row. But, just one of those things that as you're trying to get a business started, you do what you have to do to survive type thing.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. And I mean, like with that time period, where would you say were there highs first or were there lows first? In from your standpoint, in that first, like let's say 2 years of business in that corner location on Garnett.
Yeah, I mean, it was mostly highs. Like we were just so ecstatic to be part of this thing. Like you and I have discussed on here, the how CrossFit allowed us to kind of feel like an athlete again, and we had lost so much of that identity through the first 4 years of leaving college and working in corporate America, that we just weren't athletes anymore. Like I even wasn't even enjoying training. Like I remember at my corporate job before we started the CrossFit gym, I would leave work, go to 24-hour fitness, slam one body part because I was doing a bro split. I would literally just be like, okay, back. And I'd go in, I'd do like 9 sets of back, make sure I didn't sweat too much because I had to get back to work. And that was like my training. I would do one body part for 45 minutes each day. And then if I had the energy at the end of the day, I'd go do cardio. I remember doing that, like back to 24-hour fitness to go run on the treadmill. But yeah, it was definitely mostly highs in the CrossFit gym because I looked forward to it so much. Like I very much didn't look forward to getting up at 5:30 a.m. after sleeping for 5 hours, but I did look forward to what we were building. And when you talk about the highs and the lows, the highs were certainly that, like it was the being part of something that we're growing that's ours. The lows are that it had a massive negative effect on Kim and I's relationship. She was in grad school at the time too, so she was at USD getting her MBA, and we never saw each other. Like, we didn't live together. I was extremely busy with the gym. She was extremely busy with her MBA. I remember one massive fight in early 2011 where we actually broke up. It was the only time we broke up. We broke up for 1 week, and we just decided we weren't going to do this thing anymore. And we didn't see each other or talk for an entire week. And then we reconvened and we came back together, and we were like, okay, like, we need to make this thing work. Like, we obviously love each other. I moved out here. Like, let's try and reignite this thing. And so we did, but it was a lot of tears, a lot of up and down emotionally. And so, yeah, that was certainly the hardest part. And then obviously there's lows as well, and highs and lows in the financial side of things. But I think we can get into that here in a second.
Yeah. That was a note that I had, down, especially because if I remember correctly, you guys started the gym when you guys were like 26, 27, correct? And that is just, I feel like there's a lot for a majority of us, or I would say like my kind of peer group that I kind of feel most confidently speaking around, like that 26 versus like 30, it might only seem like 4 years, but it's kind of almost like a lifetime in between, like a progression that kind of goes there. And I think for the listeners, like, I really, really started my business like right as I was like about to turn 31. And those years were critical. Like at 26, it never would have got off the ground, like guaranteed. And I just had a lot more maturing to do, conversations to have, with people. Mine were majority, the majority were with Jenny. But it was just like that time period is, to me, is like a lifetime in between those short, 4 years sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, Anders and I both were quite immature when we both started it too. Like, I know I didn't have even the ability to the self-awareness, or even the understanding of improvement of self. Like I remember Anders in the early years of the gym, so in his late 20s, he really got into a lot of the kind of self-improvement stuff. Like, he started reading books about it and really trying to like learn business, but learn about himself as well. And I didn't do any of that until I got into my 30s. Like, that was, for me, it was like the gym was a social scene. It was like an extension of college. It was a social scene where I was just hanging out with my friends and partying, and we were drinking still. And like, I mean, it was really just like a club CrossFit sort of. So yeah, that was definitely the immature side of us kind of poking through. But the gym took off so quickly. So talking about the highs, man, in 2012, we grew so quickly that we had to expand and get a second location. And so we opened up the Cass Street location in North PB. And now we had two locations, and the gym just continued growing. So by late 2012, early 2013, Anders and I went from basically barely making enough money to pay our bills. Like, I remember when we first quit our jobs in 2011, when we decided to do the gym full time after those 8 months, we were each making about 30 grand a year. That was where we started. We were like, okay, 30 grand a year is enough that we can quit our day jobs and just put all of our eggs into this CrossFit basket. Well, fast forward 2 years later to like early 2013, we were net profiting 50 grand a month. And so Anders and I literally were taking in 15 to 20 grand a piece for a short period of time. And it happened rapidly. I mean, so fast. It was amazing. And so then we were like, well, shit, now we need to grow even more because the gym is so successful. And then this is where things kind of started going bad, because we hired a bunch of trainers. We had like Kuchan and Rossetti and Pitts and Loden and Lindsay. And so we had like 5 basically full-time trainers. Anders and I were I started doing remote coaching in 2012. So I started moving online, and that's where most of my time was spent. Anders was focusing on building and growing the business. So neither of us were super involved in like the day-to-day of the gym as much, which probably wasn't felt a ton by the members, but it was definitely happening. And then in 2015, we decided to open that one massive location on Garnett. So we closed down the other two locations and opened this one really big location. And that's where everything started sliding. Like that's where all the bad things began happening. So we were in this like super elated space of, oh my God, we're making so much money and this gym is growing so fast. And we sort of had a monopoly on PB because we had Central PB and then we had North PB, but then we shut down those two locations and only had the one Central PB location. And so all of that occurred at the same time that other gyms began opening up. So you're talking about that competition in Bali that's happening now. It literally was happening at the same time in PB. So we now go from having two $5,000 rent locations to one $15,000 rent location. So we increase our overhead by 50%, and we decrease our monopoly because we no longer have North PB on lockdown. And then P360 started coming in and Movement Warehouse and all the big box gyms like Crunch and 24 Hour Fitness. And they like Crunch started selling memberships for $10 a month. And they offered functional fitness classes too. So it was like this whole confluence of events, and the business just started depleting at that point. And so that was sort of the beginning of the end for us in 2015, which feels like it happened kind of rapidly.
Yeah, it's interesting hearing like the business side of things because I was, just a member at that point. It's hard. My memory is kind of shit now looking back on it, but like you could, from my perspective, there was something special about that Garnett location, and it was almost like from the flip of a switch, like that location. I don't even know what to call that. The really big one, it just never had that like spark that the other one did. It was
Yeah.
almost like I remember kind of just like feeling deflated about it and like wishing we could just go back to Garnett. Even though the gym was smaller, there wasn't as much space. It just, there was, you could feel that a little bit.
Yeah.
And then from that, like you said, you were actually very early into like the remote kind of coaching space. When did you kind of start putting the rest of these pieces together? And please correct me if I'm wrong here, Bryan. Isn't this around the same time that your wife Kim also started her own business and went like full time into that?
Yeah, so she was working at Qualcomm and moving up the chain there, all the way up from when she got her MBA paid for by Qualcomm. So she was part of Qualcomm from like 2008 to 2014, and then right around 2014, she left Qualcomm and started her own business as well. So she started her own business at about the time that the gym was doing its best, but directly before the gym started to decline. And so that was certainly like as we kind of fast forward a couple years here to call it 2016, when Anders and I realized that we probably like our future probably wasn't in CrossFit. He started becoming a bit demoralized, I guess, by the number of injuries that were occurring with members. So he remember when Teresa Larson from Movement RX moved into our building and rented space from us. And so Anders started getting pretty into this idea of fixing people, where he said what we were doing was hurting people. And he and I had a bit of a disagreement there, because I didn't really feel like we were hurting people per se. I just felt like there was a culture that was way too focused on CrossFit for competition. And so what I felt like was that the culture needed to shift to be less of this focus on CrossFit competition and more on CrossFit for the general population. But he saw these people coming in, like he had a client, Sam, whose back was super messed up from prior years of things that he did. And so he realized that there were a whole sect of people that couldn't do CrossFit, like people with pre-existing conditions or with mobility restrictions. And so he wanted to start working on that side of the business. And I wanted to just kind of keep doing what we were doing, but with like a slight difference in approach. And he and I just butted heads about that. And so once we kind of made the ultimate decision that we were done with this and it was time for us to move on, that was really, really tough time for us, because Kim was, a year or two into her business, and I didn't know what I was going to do next. I had my remote clients, and so I knew that that was the easiest thing to lean on. Like I started remote coaching in 2011. I reached a point where I had over 30 clients, which was great money. It was very time consuming too. And so I felt a little bit restricted by saying, okay, I'm going to put all my eggs into this basket of remote coaching because it takes all my time. I can't actually do anything else on top of that. And so I didn't exactly know what to do there. And the business was dwindling. We had over 300 members when we moved to that really big palatial location. And by the time Anders and I split in 2016, 2017, we were down to 150 members. And so our membership literally was cut in half, and we couldn't even afford to really pay ourselves at all. I remember when we split, we were both taking in, I think, $2,000 a month each. So it's crazy, this elevation. We went from like, okay, we're paying ourselves $3,000 a month. Yay, we can quit our jobs. And then it was like, now we're making so much fucking money like 3 years later. And then we're back to making no money. And so it just felt like I was going backwards, and I was lost, man. I didn't know what I was going to do and how I was going to get back to being successful again.
Yeah. And would you say some of those, and what's interesting, and for the listeners out, like I'm getting a lot of these things for the first time from Bryan as well. Like I saw the outside perspective of this literally as just a member at the gym, but this is, kind of the first time hearing these parts. What sort of things like, and this is obviously a low we're touching on now, and I can relate to this, all too well. And you start to question and ask yourself, like, was that a fluke? Like, did I just get lucky? Like, am I ever going to be able to get back to that? And like you said, it ends up being a lot of like personal development and like finding the confidence in yourself, and especially on the back end of this, because when you guys were building the gym, it was like you guys, there's two of you, to bounce ideas off of. But now when it's like, okay, it's myself, and what am I going to do, that like negative loop of self-talk can much more easily like turn into a loud voice, and then like a shouting voice, and it becomes like, kind of overwhelming, to be completely honest.
No, you're totally right. I mean, I remember having many nights, like I'm not like a sleepless night type person, but I remember laying in bed at all hours of the night and just feeling my heart racing because there's like so much anxiety in me of not knowing the unknown. I mean, I say this all the time. There's a ton of anxiety in the unknown. And so it's like I correlate it to this idea of like when you're in a relationship with a girl and you're younger, and you can tell that it's just not like it used to be. Like you can feel it starting to deteriorate, and you kind of just want it to either be over or you want it to be okay. You don't want to be stuck in this like unknown zone where you don't know what's going to happen, but you'd rather like honestly, I would rather it just be done, because then I can, understand, okay, it's done and now I can move on type thing. But I was stuck in this unknown, and I was stuck in it for like a year. Like I couldn't get out of it. I just didn't know what to do. And yeah, it was just an awful time. And so at that point, I decided to start Evolved Training Systems, which was my group program. And I should actually backtrack for a second, because Kim and I started a failed business together in 2015. We started a business called Active Traveler Network. And our idea was to do a subscription fitness program, much like I did with Evolved. And we had 4 different paths. There was a body weight only path, because it targeted at people that are traveling or vacationing, So we had a body weight only path. We had a dumbbell only path. We had a rings only path. We called it the gymnastics jet setter. And so it would be for people that just want to grab a $30 pair of rings, and you can tie them to trees. You can do all sorts of stuff, whatever. She and I spent hours upon hours and hours making videos in the park of all these movement demos. And so we literally created our first subscription program back in 2015, but we just didn't do it right. Like it wasn't very professionally done. And we were we charged $5 a month. That was our price point, because our idea was that we would get thousands of people. Like if it's only $5 a month, thousands of people will buy this because why wouldn't you? It's only $5 a month, But what we didn't account for is that there's a buying decision that has to be made. So yeah, if we can get you to make a buying decision, it's probably unlikely you're going to cancel your membership because it's $5 a month. But on the other side, like people still have to make that buying decision, and that just wasn't happening. So we did that business for like a year and a half, and then we shut it down. But what it did is it taught me so much that I was able to take into starting Evolve Training Systems. And at that point, I raised the price point. I did it much more professionally. I had an entire website built by a professional team, started my group program. And that was what I ended up doing as kind of my next step. Like in that unknown space of what am I going to do next? I was just like, well, I have to do something. So I'm just going to do something actionable. I'm going to start this program. And that was kind of the beginning of everything back in 2017.
Yeah, and one thing I wanted to touch on really quickly, when you were using that example of like when you're younger and you have like a relationship that is pretty much about to fail, and you just want to jump to the other side of it where it's either like good again and miraculously good again, or it's like done and there's no screaming match and whatever, you guys are over each other and move on. Like what I really thought in that is like entrepreneurship is having that really uncomfortable conversation that neither of you guys want to have, and having it in like a civil, adult manner. Like there is so much of that. And in the beginning, you're just like, I wouldn't even say in the beginning, for a long while, you're like, fuck, I don't want to do this. But that is exactly what you need to do and get good at. And now it's like, I feel comfortable saying like, I have finally emerged onto the other part where I'm like, fuck, God damn it, I'm here. But I know it's like, I just have to do it. And I don't want to, but I know I've had like, I'm on like round 5 now. I know I need to have this conversation, and that's whether that's about sales, planning finances, or whatever areas, like maybe it's just about, confidence in yourself sort of thing. But that's one, when you were describing, like, that's exactly what that is. And a lot of it is like, unfortunately, you learn a lot of those lessons the hard way or by going through them.
Well, you have to be in that uncomfortable state to be able to come out of it with like a different perspective. And like what you said just now really resonated with me, where it's like the confidence that I'm successful type thing, because throughout the years, there's so much doubt. Like even when I started Evolved in 2017, I quickly shot up to like 200 members within the matter of the first 6 months. I think of starting that Evolved program, I had 200 members basically. And it felt like a facade. It was like, oh my God, like this is insane. But also like, what if these people decide they don't want to stay with me? Like, what if they all leave? Like all this stuff. And it took so many years. It probably even took until 2 years ago before I was like, okay, like, I think I'm successful now. Like, you see the money coming in, but you don't really believe that it's going to stay. And so I see that a lot in you too. And that's where I'm trying to tie this in, is like, I saw a lot of that doubt a couple years ago. And now I feel like you're in a place where you believe in your success and you're confident in its staying power as well. Is that accurate?
It is. There is. The fear is always there, and something that I realized, like it's not going to go away, unfortunately, because so Upgrade, the launch of Upgrade was really what kind of like kickstarted the idea of this episode. And for a little bit of backstory, it's a collaboration project between me and Jackson Pias, and we just launched the first cohort, probably like about 3 weeks ago by the time this episode comes out. And I really remember like the night before, him and I were messaging. We're like, see what's going to happen. Like I literally went to bed. I was like, I had three goals, three tiers of goals. The first tier was like, I'm not a fucking failure. That was like, if we can sell this many spots, like I'm not a failure and haven't wasted the last 6 months of my life, like busting ass on this thing. The next tier was like, oh, I'm over the moon, right? Like, wow, this is okay. Like, what? I'm not a failure. And I hit this like real goal I set. And then our third tier goal was like our impossible goal, like pie in the sky number where we were going to like shut it down and cap it. Within 30 hours, we hit that third tier goal. And I was like, holy
Amazing.
shit. Like I had all this launch plan written out. I wrote out all these like emails and stuff. I only had to send one email. I literally had to close it. I had to go in there and close
Yeah.
it and turn people away. So that was like a high. Like, holy shit, this like the people actually, this resonated really, really well. And then the fear after set in was like, okay, now is it good enough? For me, even having Jackson on the project, right? Who's a big name in this space, super, super intelligent, still didn't make me feel any better. And that's when I realized like that's just a character trait. I am always going to have that. It's never going to be good enough sort of thing, and just fear of that.
Well, fear drives you forward, right? I mean, it's motivating in some ways. It's unfortunate though that like you always feel that, because there's always like that lingering doubt in the back of your mind, which it's kind of like the comparison is the thief of joy thing, where like it's really hard to be content and happy with your success if you're comparing yourself to someone else. And it kind of has that same sense of kind of having that in the back of your mind. It's like a similar sense of, oh, I just don't know.
Yeah. And the one thing in kind of what prompted the title of this is the second time where I've had like a really, really high in the business, and I won't let myself like enjoy it because I know the lows are going to come. And it's like, if I really feel those highs and I allow myself to like, triumph and pump my fist in the air and be like, yeah, those lows are going to feel so much worse. So if I just, pare back my enjoyment of the highs, the lows won't be as like damning per se. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of just like a fear mechanism really, or like a coping mechanism.
Yeah.
But it's something like I'm hoping that like once I get into like my fifth, sixth, like real high, I'll like let it go a little bit. And there's that thing like success leaves clues. Like I have a successful coaching business. This has been my, I guess, second kind of, I guess technically third, like the check-in system and stuff, which is kind of fueled part of Upgrade. Like that is successful. I have enough validation of that to where I'm like, okay, this is a good product. People are super pumped about that. I guess the Upgrade would be number 3, but kind of once I get more, more confidence builds. But it is something that like the lows feel awful, and you just question yourself. And there was a lot of that in 2022 for me. It was a lot of like finding my own way. I made a lot of 2021 was like my first year where I'm like, wow, I'm making like I'm making more money than I made in my software career. Like I'm doing well. And then I made some, I wouldn't even call them bad decisions. I learned some lessons, some very, very costly lessons on trying to grow, investing money in places, to realize like I don't really morally agree with some of these things, and I'm going to like bet on myself sort of thing, and do what I feel is right. But that cost me a lot of money of that like seemingly successful year to learn those lessons. And that was last winter was a lot of like lows.
Can you expand on any of that, or do you want to keep that a little closer to the vest?
No. I am a super open book, and I feel like it helps people in positions, especially around things. So the check-in system was really, really successful early on. The other note I had down here was 2021 of February was my first like $20,000 month, like money in the bank, $20,000 that month. And I was like, this is fucking insane. And it was the first time I like raised my prices for my, I used to provide my coaching in like, I would open it in like cohorts, like groups, and then I would take on like 20 clients for like 6 months, and there was like a paid in full option, and everyone started paying in full. So I raised my rates and everyone paid in full. And then I launched the check-in system, right? I sold it to a number of people. They were super pumped. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to run some Facebook ads to this. Like I'm a resourceful person. I can figure this out. I set it up. It was like $30, I think. And I just turned on the ads, built the targeting myself off of what I thought might work. And we went to, it was my birthday coming up because it was the end of February and my birthday's in early March. We went to a little island in Mexico because we were living in Mexico at the time. And the check-in system was just selling. And I fully automated all of it. And I'm like, holy shit, I'm sitting here on the beach, but I would get like email pings. And I was selling like 10 a day.
Wow.
And they were $30 a pop. And I'm like, I'm literally doing fucking nothing. Right. And this money's just rolling in like $300 a day. And then I just came off that big, great month. But the only thing that I could think of is like, this isn't going to last. And I was terrified. And I was like, I'm going to have a low. And then I don't want to bask in this high because I know that low is going to feel so much worse. And that was the first time where I was like, fuck this. Like I wanted to celebrate this like win, but I was scared to because I was like emotionally preparing for when things weren't going.
And did the low come or no?
Oh yeah. So the check-in system was selling. I was profitable from January through July on the check-in system, just running Facebook ads myself, like on the side in addition to my full-time, coaching thing. In August, I made 2 changes. Hired a business coach, which was expensive. It was $2,000 a month. And I also brought a team on to run my Facebook ads. And that was, I was paying them like $3,000 a month. And then also my ad spend went up to like $4,000 a month. So like from July, like August, I just added $9,000 a month of expenses onto Straker Nutrition Co. on the top of like the probably like 4 I already had for just like my normal, month to month things. And the reality is they weren't really able to do any better.
That's what I was going to say. Is that seems like a lot of money for like considering you were successful in creating the ads yourself. That seems like a huge investment. Yeah,
it was. And what it ended up being into is like, I just started like and with how my coaching worked is I had my 4th launch of the year in August. And then I wasn't going to take on any like new clients again until like the beginning of the year when I would launch again. And I was burning, like at the worst part, I was like literally just in the red, like 6.5K per month, like month after month. Yeah. And the fears were just like what was like this fascinating, miraculous year in the beginning turned into I'm a failure. I fucked this whole thing up at the end. And that really, really like weighed on me. And through last winter was like really, really rough. And then coupled with like we were in Phoenix or Scottsdale and I really didn't like it there that much. Which I think we had shitty Airbnbs, which was a big part of that. And then with some of the things with the business coaching, I just didn't really agree with a lot of it. And it was like a room that I kind of realized I didn't want to be in.
The kind really of like, is it, sorry to interrupt, but is it the kind of fake marketing, like fake persona type piece?
I mean, kind of. It wasn't like malicious by any stretch of the imagination. It just wasn't for me, Yeah. And I realized like this isn't how I feel that I want to run, my business. And something that, for any coaches out there listening, I would not recommend naming your business after yourself. Like that's one of my biggest regrets right there. It's something I will eventually fix at some point. It's just too deeply embedded. I'm a one-man show. And if that is a non-revenue generating activity that I do not need to focus on. But because like it's hard when you have a hard time detaching your business from your personal self, especially when it's your name sort of thing. And I realized like, I just want to be really, really good at coaching. I want my success rate to be really, really high. And when I ran those at the end of last year, like I didn't feel good about it. And that was one of the things like the end of 2021. So I guess, 2 years ago, I was like, I'm going to take a reload year and do what I think is best how I feel like really, really good with like my, moral compass, and just focus on being really, really good at coaching. And I turned off all the, Facebook ads and stuff like that. I was like, I'm going to let this thing grow, or just sell organically, or some, small Instagram marketing type stuff, and really just focus on creating a really, really sharp knife in terms of my coaching skills. And if I just focus on being a really, really damn good coach, my clients will do my marketing for me. And that turned out to be a very, very good double down of betting on yourself. And I didn't do much marketing last year at all. And all my clients referred to me, the rest of my clients.
That's awesome, dude. Yeah, that's really great. I feel like we didn't actually get to delve into a lot of your kind of beginnings of moving into the online space. We kind of spent most of this time talking about my journey. So maybe we can touch on that a little in the next episode too. But one of the things that I am really kind of envious might be the word or whatever, but you have a product. And that is something that Kim and I both have been for the last like 3 years. We've just been talking about what is the product that we're going to create, because both of us, she and I, are both in service industries, right? Like, yes, I have a product in that I write group programs and people buy the group programs, but it's not like a hands-off thing. Like with you sell your check-in system and it's all automated and you don't really have to touch it aside from, once a year if you do some upgrades to it or something like that. But in my business, I am the product, I sell the programs, but then there's this attached side of, now there's the service that goes into that. There's the questions and the answers and the form videos and the blog posts that go along with the new cycles. And like, it's this constant recurring pattern of every 6 weeks when there's a new cycle, or 12 weeks or whatever it is, there's this whole process that has to go through. There's new members constantly coming in that have the same questions that the other members had. And so there's never a point where I am able to disconnect and take time away. So that's one of the things that I want to work on over this next decade, is figuring out a way where I don't have to be there all the time. Like, I fucking love it. I love the ability to connect with the members and watch them week to week, improve their form, improve their understanding of methodologies and stuff like that. But it is a bit of a burden when Kim and I want to go take a vacation together or something. And every morning I'm up at 6 a.m. spending an hour and a half on my computer checking in, or, I get an email that something is wrong and I need to drop what I'm doing and run back to the room and do that, or, whatever it is. It's just, I can't actually take a week or two off and just go somewhere and not think about work. And so my friends that work corporate jobs, we have this conversation a lot, because they're like, oh, I'm so envious that like, you work on your own time and you can do whatever you want and you're impassioned about what you do and all this stuff. And I'm like, yeah, but when you tell your work that you're taking a 2-week vacation with your wife, like, they don't bother you, So there's certainly like the pros and the cons to entrepreneurship in that way too.
Yeah, that's a big one. In 4 years, I'm coming up on, I got to make sure I'm getting it's 4 or 5. I can't remember. There's been 1 week I've not completed check-ins in, it's either 4 years or 5 years. I can't remember, but since I started. And that,
yeah,
especially with the travel stuff, I mean, it's a lot of like planning. Okay, I need Monday, Tuesday so I can get all of my shit done. And then we'll like when we travel back to the States, okay, we're going to leave on Wednesday. Wednesday and Thursday are spent in airports and stuff traveling. I'm a zombie when I get to wherever on Friday. I get like a Saturday, a Sunday to prepare, and I'm right back into check-ins. Yep. And but don't get me wrong, I do love it. And I guess the one note that this is a bit of a joke that we'll wrap up on, because this one's getting a little bit long, is when I was still in my software engineer job and you guys were running the gym and stuff, I was so jealous that you guys got to work out in the middle of the day. Because it's either like when you're working a 9 to 5, you're relegated to 6 in the morning or 6 p.m. And it's either like you get up early and it's still, I remember there was a month or two where I was like working out in the mornings and it was still dark out when I was driving to the gym. And I was like, I was like, I feel terrible. I can't do this. Or it's after the day where like you're if it's a bad day, like it sucks up your energy. You don't really want to go. And then like, I got to go squat 85% now at 6:30 p.m., you know, and I was so envious of that. And then that was like the thing I was most excited about, you know, when I started my business full time. I was like, I can go work out in the middle of the day. Like it's like a 10-year dream come true. And then of course, like COVID happens and work from home happens. And now the gyms are full of motherfuckers that work remote and can train in the middle of the day. And I'm like, no, I took all the risk by going out on my own to come here during the middle of the day. Like you go back to your 6 p.m. or 6 a.m. and you leave the middle to me because I took the risk.
Yeah, dude, one of the things that bothers me the most is that, like, literally what you said, I thought I was so special given that I created this cozy little life where I can work from anywhere type thing. And then as soon as all these motherfuckers started working from home too, from COVID, it's like I'm not special anymore. Everyone works from home, you know? I just want to go back to being special.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I guess ultimately, you know, there are certainly highs and lows of entrepreneurship. And I think for the most part, the highs outweigh the lows. Like I'll take the autonomy that I have with my career and the time at which I decide I want to work and when I work out and stuff like that. Like I would take that over the ability to take vacations rent free. Like to me, that it's a small cost to pay to be able to have this autonomy and the privilege of doing things the way that we want to do them without like a boss overlooking our shoulder and stuff like that.
Yeah, I feel like the term purpose comes in a bit more. Like as someone, I worked in like startups and stuff, you know, I had very little experience or time, I would say, in like a true corporate America setting. I was fortunate that I learned very early on that like Aaron does not do corporate America. So I worked in like startups and small businesses, and the owners were always like it was like their baby, and I never really got it. Like especially at the last one, the owner, the CEO would always be like trying to have us go get like tacos with him and stuff after the end of the day, and like, you know, talk about more business. And I'm like, no dude, I've been here for like 9 hours, I don't want to fucking be
Let
here
me go
anymore.
God.
Yeah. And I just never got it. But now it's like, dude, it's fucking 10:24 p.m., you know, on a Tuesday night, and I'm sitting here recording this podcast with you, and I still have check-ins to complete after it. And I'm not stoked I'm doing check-ins at 10:24 at night, but I'm stoked about the environment that allows me to do that and the people that put their trust in me, and I would say the name so far that I've built for myself in the space. I am proud about that.
Absolutely, dude. I mean, I'm really glad to hear that throughout the trials and tribulations and the self-doubt that you've had over the 2021 year, that it's all kind of come back around, and to see the success of Upgrade and have it sell out in the first 30 hours or whatever that is just insane, and a huge testament to everything that you've put into this. So well deserved, man.
Appreciate that, Bryan. All right, guys. So apologies, this one's a little bit longer, but I think it's full of some good nuggets, especially for some of the newer coaches or people thinking about entering the space as well. Bryan and I will talk to you next week.